I was so pro conference forever, and then I just got beaten down. Like, welcome to the Thought Feeder podcast. My name is Joel Goodman, and with me is the illustrious John Steven Stansel, coming to you from a couple of different places in the United States, still hunkered down at home, still working tirelessly on various social media and digital marketing projects. Today, JS and I want to talk about conferences. We want to talk about learning opportunities in the higher ed space, but I think, in larger industries entirely.
Yeah, and full disclosure, I am on the conference committee for High Ed Web, so plug for that. But yeah, this year conferences are going to look a lot different. They're going online. We're going to have more webinars and et cetera this year. And kind of want to talk today a little bit about how we think this might be a boon to solve some of the issues that I've had with conferences in the past that I think is kind of the weak point. And that comes down to preaching to the choir. When I go speak at conferences, as much as I enjoy it, sometimes I feel like the entire audience is made up of people who just agree with me, other social media managers, and I love seeing all the other social media managers, and I love hearing other social media managers because it gives you that feeling like, okay, other people have the same struggles, and everything that I'm doing, other people are doing, I'm on the right track, but there's also a part of me that says, man, I wish there was a VP of advancement in the audience or a director of admissions in the audience to hear what all of these people have to say. I'll be in a conference session hearing a social media manager at a university talk and think, man, this is amazing. I wish my boss were here.
Mm-hmm.
And I think a lot of preaching to the choir happens at conferences. And I think things shifting to an online option gives us that opportunity to share some of this knowledge with people that may otherwise not be able to attend some of these conferences that we're at. And likewise, give us the opportunity to hear from people that we don't normally get to hear from at the conferences that we get to go to.
Here's a question within that, though. Do you think that VPs are actually going to attend any of these? Because this actually touches on a larger issue within, at least within higher ed, and I'm sure this happens in other industries. But there's sort of like a caste system. It's a tier or a superiority split, and there are a lot of conferences like High Ed Web where it's honestly not a lot of decision makers that go. And like High Ed Web, I've been attending High Ed Web since 2008. I think 2008. Springfield, Missouri was the first High Ed Web conference that I went to, and I think I've been on the attendee side, I've been on the sponsor side. Bravery's had a table there. I've worked on the committee. I've done web work and creative work for the conference, and I think a lot of what I've heard is right on that line of what you said, Jess, is that we don't get a lot of decision makers or a lot of leadership that attends that conference. Instead, they're going to things like AMA Symposium, or they're going to conferences that are directed specifically at leadership. And I think that's a problem, and I don't know how we fix that, and I don't necessarily know that going entirely online with our conferences is going to fix that.
Well, to counter that,
yeah,
I would argue that by going online or offering online options, last year High Ed Web live streamed a few sessions for the first time ever, and I know that there are plans to do that at future conferences. We might not be able to get a VP to attend a full online conference, but we might be able to get them to sit down and watch a session or have it on in the background and listen to highlights. It's not ideal, but it is a sort of beachhead into that world. But another thing to address too is, yes, VPs have their own conferences. There is a tiered level, and there are conferences outside of social media and web design that are going on. And my concern on some of those is that there are people at those conferences who are presenting on the topics of social media and web design that if we heard, we would have our jaws drop to the floor and say, no, that's the person you're listening to. Because at an admissions conference, there is an admissions counselor talking about social media strategies that if their university social media manager was there, would say, oh my God, you're presenting the exact thing I told you not to do.
Yeah.
So one, how do we get leadership and break down silos and get those people to learn about what's being said at other conferences, and vice versa? How do we get our own profession to present
Yeah.
at some of these other conferences and get in front of them? So it's a kind of both getting leadership to our conferences and getting us to the leadership conferences to present.
Yeah, so two thoughts around that too. So in our industry, again, probably other industries, but definitely within higher ed, there has always been a push from leaders. Like we'll take Liz Gross at Campus Sonar, for instance. I've seen her tweet about how she encourages her staff to submit talks to conferences all the time because it's a great way to share their knowledge and what they're doing. And there's often a sentiment expressed from usually people that are new to higher ed, but even people that are just, not, they don't consider themselves public speakers or whatever, that they don't feel comfortable, but they want to branch out and do that. So I wonder if part of it is folks just not feeling confident enough to submit to these leadership, these like higher level, whatever, like, yeah, more leadership focused conferences. Or I kind of think it might be that we're just not aware of them because they're not marketing at us, and there aren't a lot of great lists. Like, I mean, I know when I've been researching conferences to submit talks to, I'll go to Campus Sonar's site and I'll look through the list of what they have, where they're speaking. It's like, wow, there's a ton of conferences that are in the higher ed space that just don't market themselves, or we don't hear about them.
Yeah, I think there's a lot to unpack here. So first, let's talk about people not submitting to conferences because of nervousness, or it's another episode we bring up, imposter syndrome.
Right.
If you're listening to this, you have worthy things to share with the greater professional community. Get out there, put yourself out there, do it. I've often said somewhere out there is a social media manager that's working at a community college that is doing incredible things that we don't know about because they're not presenting at conferences and we're not looking for them.
Yeah.
So you've got to cheerlead yourself. You've got to get out there yourself. 2, budgets. Comes down to the fact, like, I can go present at a conference, but I got to pay to do it. And I've got to have the school pay to do it. And the school's only going to pay for me to attend it. Maybe if I'm lucky, one conference a year. So if I'm going to attend a conference, it's going to be something like High Ed Web, where I'm going to benefit and I'm going to learn from, in addition to going to present at. There's no incentive for me to ask the school to pay for my one conference a year to go attend an admissions conference and speak there. So I think I would like to see conferences offer some sort of like almost like exchange student program of like a scholarship for, a web person to attend an admissions conference and vice versa. I know Case does like a division scholarship to bring somebody, if it's Case D3, to bring someone from D4 to that conference, which is good, but it's still just another Case person, just another geographic location. I'd love to see like, oh, hey, we're going to bring somebody from outside the world of advancement and marketing to this conference to speak to us and also to learn from us. But again, it comes down to like, now that so many conferences are web-based and some are changing their rates. High Ed Web is free this year. Like, hey, let's find ways to get some folks that normally wouldn't attend to attend. There are ways for that to happen.
Yeah, I'm interested to see how High Ed Web and other conferences going free and online plays out, like how good their engagement rates are, considering that, I don't know, I think there is some leverage when you have money in the game or skin in the game where you've had to pay something, even if it's $25. Think about going to like a WordCamp, or one of the WordPress regional conferences, and they're always cheap, and they always have online versions of it. But even WordCamp USA, their big like overarching one for the whole country, it's fairly cheap to get a live stream attendance, but it gives some kind of importance. Like for me, I'm worried that all these different online conferences that are free, I'm not gonna. So thinking like the all day all night conference that you're gonna be speaking at, JS. What is that, next week?
In 2 weeks.
Which is awesome, and y'all should go get a ticket because it's a really cool concept, going 24 hours basically in all time zones, people all over the globe speaking, giving their knowledge. Super cool idea. But along with that, I bought a ticket and I'm already like, I don't know, it's a lot of webinars, and I'm already on webinar fatigue like most of us are, and it's just been a lot of this. But I paid money, so I'm at least gonna pay attention to what's going on, and I may have to like time shift because I don't want to be up at 3 a.m. Well, maybe I do 3 a.m. keynote.
Yeah, webinar fatigue is real, and on top of that, when I was presenting at Case SMC online recently, which was fantastic, and this is something that I needed to do, not the conference committee needed to do, but I jotted a note down for future conference, like write a very clear away message for your emails that says, even though I am technically at my desk and able to respond to you, I am attending a conference right now, and I would like you to imagine that I am in a faraway land and unable to deal with a crisis or answer your urgent email to post something on social today. While I am here, I am not really here.
Yeah.
And the school paid for me to attend this conference, and I need to focus on learning right now because that's what we're paying money to do. So that's another issue that I found with webinars now, is that we have to be able to clearly say, hey, look, we're at a conference, even though I might be in my office, I'm not there.
Yeah.
Paying for that helps.
No doubt. I think I think money is important in all these things. I think even going back to the idea of how do we get more knowledgeable people to speak at other conferences or to attend other conferences. I think on the speaking side, there are so many conferences that don't offer stipends or any sort of honorarium for people that are speaking. And that makes it really difficult also to justify going out. It's unless you're a keynote speaker, you're not going to get paid. And there are conference organizations like Confab that do an awesome job of recognizing that these people with knowledge are giving their time and years of learning and hours and hours and hours of preparation for it, as well as having to travel. And I think I wish more conferences paid attention to thanking their speakers, the people that make the conference happen. Honestly, I mean, they're people that run the thing. They're the people that do the programming and the people that handle renting out a space and getting the caterers on board, and they do a lot of work. But without speakers, you don't have anything. Like without people sharing their knowledge, you don't have anything. And I think there's a little bit of a gap there with some conferences where I don't know, they leave their speakers feeling, especially when the speakers go on to speak at other conferences where they do get some sort of payment or some sort of big thank you.
Well, I mean, even a discount of the conference fee.
Yeah, pay the whole conference fee.
Goes a long way. I mean,
and there was a conference I got accepted to last year that I had to pull out of because I was still going to have to pay for travel. I was still going to have to pay for hotel, and I only got half off the conference fee. And for me, I mean, honestly, sometimes I'm a terrible conference attendee, but sometimes I'm going to speak. I'm going to network and to speak and to be there. And there should be some kind of compensation entirely. Like,
I've had to turn down a lot of conferences because I get asked to speak and they'll say, oh, okay, I'd love to do this, but I still have to pay to go to the conference and pay all the travel. And it's like, I make a social media manager's salary. I can't afford to do that out of pocket. And the school is not in the business of sending me around to go help other schools. So they're not going to pay for more than one. So generally, I've made a conscious decision of, this is the conference I'm going to go to this year. I'm going to speak and I'm going to attend, and I need to benefit somehow from both. I need to be able to learn at that conference, and I want to be able to present to people who will be receptive to what I have to say in some sort of way.
Yeah. I'd say word of advice to conference organizers: if you're going to ask someone specifically to speak at your conference, compensate them somehow. Like, honestly, I think there's also you're going to get lower quality people filling in those knowledge gaps. Or it goes back to like an admissions counselor that happens to have a Twitter and a Facebook and started learning Snapchat 2 months ago and whatever else, speaking at an admissions conference. But you could have someone that's way smarter if you were willing to say, yeah, I mean, of course it's comped and we've got a hotel room for you out of our block or an extreme discount on it, and we'll pay for your travel, like that sort of thing.
But again, we complain about the cost of conferences sometimes, and that's the sort of thing that adds to the cost of the conference. Like, it builds and builds. Like, I've been on several, not just Hyatt Web, I've been on other conference committees, and just looking at the cost of what it costs to rent out the conference area. Like, you want Wi-Fi?
Yeah.
That's another giant fee. You want to feed people? All right. Complain about the food at the conference, but every single thing is going to add more in there to that cost. So, have a total solution to that because I've been on both ends of that. I've been on like a conference selection committee where I've had to ask people like, "Hey, I need 10 people to
Right.
present, and we can't pay for you pay for your travel or anything else."
I've been on a location selection committee. Like, you know, like I've had to deal with, okay, well, here are 25 bids that we've gotten from hotels and convention centers and whatever else. Which one is going to allow us to do as much as possible, and which one is still going to provide a really good experience to people that are attending? And I mean, in person is expensive
Mm-hmm.
for anything, right? But I wonder if this shift to digital only that we're kind of forced to do, and I obviously think that when we have a good handle on the pandemic and there's a vaccine and we have ways to treat and therapies for people that get sick with COVID-19, and it's not necessarily a pandemic anymore, we'll go back to in-person stuff in some way and in some form. But I think there's an opportunity to get better speakers by charging a little bit of money because the overhead is so low. I don't know. I've been researching a lot. I was actually thinking about like, what if you did an online conference that was all like super intensive, like workshop oriented type of things instead of rehashing the 1,000 webinars that already exist online? Because I think that's one danger in doing a completely online conference, is that you're online. You can you can go to YouTube and search for anything, or like like hit up SlideShare and find a deck and a link to a talk from 5 years ago that's saying the same things, and it's like cool, someone else is rehashing it, and that's great too. But there's a lot of content on the web. When you're in person, it's like the thing that's there is the thing that you're doing. You're not going to go sit in your hotel room after paying all that money and search around YouTube for similar conference talks.
Right. And there's so much outside of the conference sessions that
Right.
is useful, like, you know, meeting people and talking to about your job over drinks or something like that, is a major part of it. And I don't really know that having a Zoom happy hour is the best analog to that.
Yeah.
And again, don't have a solution for that.
Yeah.
Like what else can you do? But I do think as we get out of COVID-19, hopefully soon, we'll see conferences offer kind of hybrid options to facilitate some of these things, where more options for you can attend in person or have an online ticket or
Yeah.
present online to get more people involved and make it more financially accessible to more, because it's important. If you, especially, we kind of ragged on like advancement and housing and admissions conferences, and those are important for them too. But being in a tech field that is
Yeah.
constantly changing day by day, it is vital for us to be on top of our game and aware of the latest techniques and best practices and strategies and know what other people are doing. Because one, it changes constantly. Two, we're often the only ones at our campuses that are the full-time person doing that. And I know I'm in charge of training other social media managers on our campus that run all the smaller accounts, who are admin assistants and admissions counselors,
Yeah.
that rely on my knowledge and training. So keeping those people up to date in their professional development is a major part of making sure you've got employees that know what they're doing.
I'm somewhat of a conference skeptic these days because I've been going to conferences forever and ever and ever, and I've never personally felt I've gotten a ton out of it. And that just might be arrogance, or I don't know, it might it might be a problem that I have. But I also think you touched on well, you made me think of something. I think you're right. It's important that in a tech field we stay up on our game, that we know what the latest things are, but I don't know that conferences give that. I don't know that the program committees are ahead of their game, or at the forefront of their game enough in general to select talks that are going to help you do that. Instead, you get a rehash of the same topics that happened the year before. I remember one year I went to a conference and there were out of I don't know, 65 talks in multiple tracks during the conference, there were 11 talks on embedding maps. Like, it's a hand-in-hand thing. You need people that are at the top of their game submitting things, but you also need program committees and program selection committees that know what the top of the game means for so many, especially like a conference of multiple tracks. Like, if you've got tracks in marketing and social media and leadership and technical and, all this stuff, you have to know all of that. And you need to you as a program selector have to be looking ahead to, okay, what's the topic for next year? Not well, and I think where they get caught is that their mode is what is going to allow us to fill a room, because obviously that's part of it, as well as what's going to allow us to get as many registrations as we can to fill our minimum. And a lot of times it just gets watered down. You don't end up with those advanced forward-thinking topics. And I don't know, there are a few conferences that I think tailor specifically to that, but it's not that common. I've experienced in higher ed and in tech. It's just the same stuff.
It's interesting, Joel, because when I proposed this being the topic of today's episode, I was all prepared to talk about all of the problems that some problems I've seen in conferences, and wanting to title this episode "Preaching to the Choir," because I think that's my biggest problem in conferences, is that we're just preaching to the choir.
I think that's exactly it.
But I am the opposite of a conference skeptic. I am. You've got me. I'm about to argue with you on some of this, because, like, first, I owe where I am in my career today to conferences. Like,
sure,
it was at a high ed web regional conference in Little Rock. I remember Brent Passmore 2 days before sent me an invite to it, and I ran to my boss's office and said, "Can I go to this?" And she said yes. And I remember going there, where I was not a full-time social media manager at the time. I was the international communications coordinator or something convoluted like that. And I was thinking about doing social media full-time, and going to that conference and going, oh, wow, hang on. That's actually where I started using Twitter. I had a Twitter account that I'd never used before. Yeah. And this active back channel made me go, oh, maybe I needed to use this, and maybe I need to change my username from something really sophomoric, like I think it was Liquid Paper Cut, and to something professional,
like J.S. Stanson.
Yeah, and start using it to connect with other people in my field and things like that. And eventually, went to a national conference and started making connections with other people in the field. We didn't meet at a conference, but we met as a direct result of me attending conferences.
And I agree with you on that front. Like, I think similarly, my career would not be the same without that network. But it's the network, right? It's the people. For me, it really hasn't been learning things at the conference from them. It's been having conversations outside. And I mean, and high ed web in particular, they emphasize how good the networking is, because it is really good. And I do have great conversations outside. I generally do not have conversations that are related to any of the talks that I saw during the day or any of the talks that are going on. I generally have conversations with people that I've connected with. I actively started using Twitter because of the 2008 conference. I think there's a lot of overlap there, and I would agree that it's greatly affected it. But it has, for me, it's been the networking, it's been the relationship building. It hasn't been the knowledge sharing, or at least the formal knowledge sharing.
Well, you've never come to one of my conference sessions, so let's see if we can change that. But back to that, it does come down to, there are sessions that you attend that can be useful. Some that I've seen some where I've gone, man, that's a great idea, but it's never going to work at our university. But it's still valuable, and I still walk away with a greater knowledge of that. I was thinking specifically of Andrew Castle did one at High Ed Web a couple years. The years are melding together, but about how he was using Twitch at his university. I'm like, this is amazing, but yeah. I don't have time, and two, this will never work, but I'm glad I am aware of it. So if my VP says, what do you think about Twitch? I have an answer for that. And there's value in that, of going, this is cool, but we can't do it.
Sure.
And I know why we can't do it. But there's also value in, you do need kind of a diverse bit of levels, so everybody who gets it. But like, one thing specifically I think about, every year there's a good conference session at a conference about accessibility, and it's something that's really basic, but people keep needing to hear the basics on certain issues of, like, there's going to be a new attendee that has no idea what alt text is and is going to have an awakening at the conference. So there's value there, but yeah, Yeah, there have been times where I've said, man, I need the advanced level of this, the power user version of this conference session or something like that. So that said, to all of our friends at on conference committees and organized conferences, it's hard work and they're volunteers, but they're always trying to improve and filled out those conference evals. Like they listen to them. Like it makes the changes for next year, and a lot of people do ignore them, but that's how you get a better conference is reading those conference evals.
Yeah, I think there's also probably just a leveling out of the audience for different conferences too. So even with the conference evaluations, like I mean for me, I don't know. I always fill them out. I have a hard time, I don't know. In the moment I don't have a hard time, but I'm judging the person based on did they, the questions are like, did they speak well? Did they feel like they're prepared on a scale of 1 to 10? How is this applicable to your work? And I'm just like,
Mm-hmm.
give people good marks if they if they didn't completely bomb it. But for me, it's like I come from a communication background. Like public speaking is something that I was critiqued on in college and something that I've done for a long time.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm thinking of it more from more in that vein. And then the content itself, it's generally like I don't know. I feel bad being like, no, this content is not relevant because maybe it's not relevant for me, but I don't necessarily feel like most of it is. But
But again, it goes back to the preaching to the choir.
yeah,
Sometimes we need to hear things that are not relevant to our daily jobs because it's relevant to our university or it's relevant to someone that we're working with. So we need to attend. Here's an area again, I'm on the conference committee. I'm going to cheerlead Hyatt Web, full disclosure. But where I think they do a really good job of is encouraging people to attend those areas outside, and they've mixed up kind of their track sessions. So
yeah,
there's more web related stuff and what might be seen as a social media track, and kind of encouraging people to go to one or two sessions outside the area. And that has been immensely valuable to me of like, maybe I'm not a web designer, but I've learned more about the struggles and I work better with the web designers at my school,
yeah,
or web
yeah.
designer at my school, because I've been to one or two of those sessions and I realize I've learned more, but I've also learned like, man, there's so much I don't know about this, and I need to listen to that expert at my school because I might think I know
Yeah,
a little bit, but I'm scratching the surface.
yeah.
So that's good too. So let's kind of convert. I was planning on splitting this episode into two sections of preaching to the choir and practicing what we preach, but I'm going to throw that a little bit out the window, but I want to kind of come back to it. So for how do we practice what we preach as far as the way we treat the conferences we attend and branching out a little bit more? So one thing I think we can do a better job of is following people outside our particular areas and participating in online discussions like enrollment management chat, hashtag EM chat. I creep on that every week. I don't participate that much because one, I'm trying to put my kid to bed when it happens. I think it's like Thursday nights at around 8ish our time central, and I'll see the questions popping up. I'm like, man, I want Winston, go to sleep, go to sleep. So I can't, but I always check in on that and kind of see what the enrollment management folks are talking about. Listening to podcasts outside our area, share this podcast with people outside your area.
Specifically, the last episode with Ella Dawson. Send that to your bosses.
Oh my goodness. Yeah, share that with everybody. And then when you go to those conferences, make an effort to attend at least one session outside of your area if you're going to be there. If you're at, the ones that I frequent, generally have something about web development or advancement, which is not my forte and what I do on a daily basis, but I want to be able to work with those people a little bit better. And then from a digital perspective, maybe I need to share on LinkedIn a little bit more.
It's surprising how active people are on LinkedIn.
Like my Twitter account, like I love it. It makes me feel so good every day to see like other social media managers chiming in like, "Oh yes, we agree. We have that problem too." And that validates like, "Okay,
Yeah.
I'm not alone." But I also want university presidents and VPs to read some of the rants that I have. So maybe I need to do that on LinkedIn. Ugh, ugh.
I mean, I rediscovered LinkedIn 6 months ago or 8 months ago or something. I started being a little bit more active there, and I mean, there's a lot going on, and a lot of it is salesy marketing, self help, fluffy, whatever. So if you've got real content, like it needs it. It needs it needs your
maybe
real
we need
thoughts.
to bring on a guest to like evangelize LinkedIn to me a little bit, because I use it professionally for my job as a social media manager for the voice of the university, but I never get excited like in the morning I'm like, oh, let's see what my Twitter notifications are today. Like LinkedIn, I'm like, I guess I better check LinkedIn, see what's going on.
And it's always like, this person shared something you might be interested in. Doesn't tell me what it is. I don't know why they think I'm interested in some person and what some person is sharing. It's sometimes not even someone I follow or am connected with. And
that's a whole other episode.
One other thing that I've been thinking about is also my problem with submitting to conferences is that oftentimes I just don't feel like I have a solid idea for a talk. And the way that I've kind of gotten around that has been by blogging more, honestly, throwing it old school. And I mean, blogs are back. Did you guys know? Like, I know podcasts came back. Now it's blogging's turn. But I've been trying to blog a lot more and write a lot more, and just being able to distill, one, it gets your name out there, but also the bigger following that you have. I mean, there are conferences like PSE Web in Canada that do their entire program selection via vote from the people that are coming to the conference, which I think is there are good and bad things about it in my mind. I'm not going to dive into that, but I think finding ways to write more about the stuff that you do in long form, even, or at least medium form. I mean, you do that, JS. So it's a lot of your rants end up as consolidated blog posts on jsstancil.com
with tons of typos.
Yeah. Well,
okay. So to wrap it up, if you're presenting at conferences, if you're going to conferences, that's fantastic. Be a part of your professional community, but also make an effort to try and learn more from others outside your area. So like we said, try to go to at least 1 or 2 sessions outside of what you do, and try to reach out to others in your area and share that information with them. Don't be afraid to send your higher up, say, hey, here's a link to a conference session video that I saw that I think you'll find valuable. Because really, right now, that might be the only way we share some of this information with them, and they need to hear it, and they should be open and receptive to it as well.
Definitely. Thanks as always for listening to the Thought Feeder podcast. I'm Joel Goodman, John Steven Stancil with me. As always, we appreciate your listening. And if you like the show, we would really appreciate a review or a rating from you, or both. You can do that on anywhere. Apple Podcasts for sure. Go to our site. We got links to everything, thoughtfeederpod.com. Please follow us on Twitter at ThoughtFeedPod. Thought Feeder is sponsored by University Insight.